Hello, everybody. My name is Eric D. Johnson, also known BrightShine, right here in the city, members in the county, state of Tennessee. Today's date is Sunday morning, February the 25th, 2024. The time 11 a.m. in the morning. First, say thank you to my family, my support for you. Continue to support, continue to keep myself employed in the Memphis tri-state area, continue to further my education, more work out online, continue to pursue my social degrees and being administrative, contract Martin at the present time, took a break and going to school in the very near future. I'm going to go back to more work out online, continue to pursue my social degrees and being administrative, contract Martin. Now, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to start my Facebook Live. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric D. Johnson, also known BrightShine, right here in the city, members in the county, state of Tennessee. Today's date is Sunday morning, February 25th, 2024. The time 11:01 a.m. First, say thank you to my family, my support for you. Continue to support, continue to keep myself employed in the Memphis tri-state area. Continue to further my education, more work out online. Continue to pursue my social degrees, being administrative. Contract Martin at the present time, took a break and going to school in the very near future. I'm going to go back to more workouts online, continue to pursue my social degrees, study being administrative, contract Martin. Now, what you see in front of you, anti-gang, anti-Gnostic, and anti-Haze. Also, adversus Iraces, translated meaning against heresy. Saint Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyons, together with Saint Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch. They wrote a 5-volume book refuting Gnosticism, proving that Gnosticism was a heresy. Also, Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, in the year 367 AD, his 39th festal letter, Easter letter, banned all non-Christian writing. Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, together with all the other bishops in the Catholic Church, they went around and collected all that Gnostic theologian writing and destroyed it. A few copies of that Gnostic theologian writing didn't get destroyed. A person took those few copies of that Gnostic theologian writing, wrapped it in some papyrus paper, put it in a jar and buried it in Nag-Hammadi, Egypt. In 1945, the little farm boy in Nag-Hammadi, Egypt was outside playing and found a jar that Gnostic theologian writing was put in. The little farm boy gave what he had found to his father, who was a farmer. And eventually, the scholars at the colleges and universities around the world, the people in academia, the sororities and the fraternities, the sohos and the frat bitches, they found out about it. And ever since then, they have been using and misusing the Nag-Hammadi library to be self-destructive and to be destructive. Trying to destroy the wildlife, nature, and the environment. Trying to destroy the North and South Pole. Now they're going out in space doing the same thing. Being destructive and self-destructive. Also, Saint Epiphanius of Salome, the Bishop of Cyprus, wrote a 3-volume book titled Panarium, Greek, Panarium, Latin, translated mean bread basket. The scholars at the colleges and universities around the world say that Saint Epiphanius of Salome 3-volume book is also adversus Iraces, against heresies. esoteric and exoteric. Esoteric and exoteric. Esoteric. Break it down to syllables. S-O-Ter-ic. Esoteric. And break it down to syllables. S-O-Ter-ic. Exoteric. And break it down to syllables. X-O-Ter-ic. Exoteric. And break it down to syllables. X-O-Ter-ic. The Almighty Conservative Vice Lord. The Almighty Vice Lord. Them four corner hustle. The Almighty Black Princeton. The Almighty Mickey Cole Cracker. The Almighty Black Disciple Poppin'. The Almighty Bluefiend Black Disciples. The Black Disciple Lord Stone Disciples. Gangster Disciple Killer GDK. Glazed Donut Killer GDK. Goofy 7-Eleven G Killer. That's important. The history of the city of Chicago. It's important. That's really why I did all the things that I do on my videos. All this time that I done took all these years is to make sure that the sorority and the fraternity, the sohos and the fat bitches, that you don't never get away with lying. All these years, people been just lying. That's all they do is lie. That's all they did was lie. Trying to hurt innocent men, women, and children. It's important. The history of the city of Chicago, the Almighty Vice Lord Nation. It's important. See, myself as well as others affiliated, associated with the Almighty Vice Lord Nation, the Lord Stone Disciples, will be united. The Lord Stone Disciples will be united. Now, what time is it? Yeah. Like I said, see, it's important. All the things that I do is to show that the sorority and the fraternity at all these colleges and universities, including the historically black colleges and universities. See, the thing that you won't never forget, when you talk about the historically black colleges and universities, your common sense, when they started these historically black colleges and universities, all them other colleges and universities were these white or Europeans, while they was building out the United States of America. Because it started, the 13 colonies, and then the Revolutionary War. So then it came the United States of America. But see, all the black / African Americans were slaves. There wasn't no such thing as going to school or going to college or getting an education. When the United States became the United States, and then you had all these states, then you had the Civil War. Slaves became free. Then you had the Freedmen's Bureau trying to educate the former slaves, trying to get the right to vote. And then when you get the right to vote, then you had all this Ku Klux Klan trying to using violence. And when it comes to these historically black colleges and universities, there wasn't no such thing as getting an education after slavery, even after slavery. Because the Ku Klux Klan were going around terrorizing the former slaves. And when it comes to this sorority and fraternity, the sorority and fraternity was at these other colleges and universities, the whites. So when you hear these historically black college and university students talking about when the sorority and fraternity at these historically black colleges and universities started, the Divine Nine, the early 1900s. It might have been a few, possibly, may have been late 1800s, like 1890, but when it comes to the Divine Nine, you was 1901, 1905, and all that. The early 1900s. But the historically black colleges and universities started, a lot of them after the Civil War. The late 1800s. So students have been going to these historically black colleges and universities and graduating. Them students were very sincere. Them students, each individuals were sincere. There was no such thing as it wasn't no thing going around trying to go behind people's backs in that way. Because there was too much Ku Klux Klan. You ain't have to worry about no another black / African American going behind your back, because the Ku Klux Klan was terrorizing all black / African Americans. There wasn't no such thing as going around talking about no voodoo or talking about no religion, no Gnosticism, no esotericism, no Freemasonry. There wasn't no such thing going around arguing about, because the Ku Klux Klan was going around terrorizing. If it was anything that black / African American were worried about, it was the Ku Klux Klan. It was the Ku Klux Klan and being lynched, being killed by the Ku Klux Klan and by other white people. Because hell, the white people didn't have to be no Ku Klux Klan to kill black / African American. But it was some organized whites calling themselves the Ku Klux Klan, going around terrorizing black / African Americans after the Civil War. After the Civil War. And so when it comes to having rights and all this, bigotry, prejudice, racism, and something else, we don't really just, it was so much bigotry, prejudice, and racism that you never even talk about sexism. How the women, how black / African American women, because you just black / African American, so it didn't, your gender didn't matter. But if you was white, for instance, when it comes to having the right to vote, women didn't vote. Let's read, here it is, Black History Month, women like Sojourner Truth. Talking about the women having the right to vote. Women didn't have the right to vote. But when you talk about bigotry, prejudice, and racism, when it comes to black / African American women, your gender really don't come up in the conversation, because you are black / African American, not just a woman. You are black / African American. You can be male or female. When you start talking about getting into the gender of the conversation, you start bringing it up after World War II. It started becoming, it gets included in the conversation. But up until then, you black / African American. It don't make no difference about your age or your sex. That's irrelevant. You black / African American, bigotry, prejudice, and racism. That's all that matters. You black / African American. When it comes to getting the right to vote, now black men after the Civil War could vote. Then they had all these Jim Crow laws and all this stuff about the right to vote. But after the Civil War, black men, was given the right to vote. Like we say, when it comes to being a woman, a female, the white women didn't have the right to vote. But when it comes to this stuff about the sorority and the fraternity and all this, see, the historical black colleges and universities, after the Civil War, the Freedmen's Bureau, that's what triggered, that was the foundation for many other historically black colleges and universities. Some historically black colleges and universities, even before the Civil War. There was some, by this being Black History Month, some historically black colleges and universities have a start before the Civil War. Before the Civil War. But many historically black colleges and universities, because of the end of the Civil War, many black / African American, these historically black colleges and universities had their start after the Civil War. After the Civil War. So when it comes to this stuff about sorority and fraternity, see, many people after the Civil War, it was rough. Yeah, life wasn't what you think it was. The Ku Klux Klan was roaming around terrorizing black / African Americans. So when it comes to worrying about, you ain't have no black / African American be walking around worrying about no Gnosticism, no Freemasonry, no Rosicrucianism. You worried about trying to just live 1 hour. Just trying to live for 30 minutes. With the Ku Klux Klan roaming around. Every second was a struggle. You have time to worry about things like that. You have time to be worried about no Western esotericism, Western mystery tradition. You ain't have time to worry about things like that. Because the Ku Klux Klan were walking around. They were roaming around terrorizing the former slaves. There were sincere individuals at the historical black colleges and universities. Sincere. Where many of these students came from, life wasn't no ideal. It wasn't being black / African American. Many people came from poor. They were poor. In the Freedmen's Bureau trying to educate former slaves, you had adult men and women, elderly men and women trying to learn how to read, write, and do math. And in the same class with little children. That's what the Freedmen's Bureau did. Tried to give former slaves education. There were many sincere black / African American men and women who were sincere in their heart. You get to the early 1900s, all these white people going around being a gangster and all this stuff about religion and all this stuff. At these historically black colleges and universities, these things started becoming things started being discussed. But see, what the white people did, when you was in slavery, see, you was a slave. You ain't had to worry about it. You couldn't worry about no education because you was a slave. So it wasn't nothing you could learn. You couldn't learn nothing except being a slave. After slavery, see, this was the Ku Klux Klan was doing. Because they were the former Confederates. They were Confederates. The Ku Klux Klan was started by former Confederate soldiers. Some were officers. They were Freemasons. the former Confederate soldiers, some were officers. They all were Freemasons. So when the Ku Klux Klan terrorizing black / African American, that Western esotericism. The former Confederate soldiers, they were Freemasons. At the historically black college and university, see, over a period of time of trying to educate the former slaves, the oppressor, imposing Western esotericism, Western mystery tradition upon the former slaves, just like they did to the first and Native Americans through violence. They use violence as a method of persuasion. Violence. So when it comes to the sororities and the fraternities at these historically black colleges and universities in the early 1900s, the Divine Nine. See, by that time, a number of former slave, black / African American, have gotten educated. Gangsterism. See what they'll do away from the school and away from the college, in the cities, in the area where you live. It wasn't just the Ku Klux Klan, but you had this gangsterism. The early 1900s. And so when the students were coming to the school in the early 1900s, some of their grandparents, former slaves, some of the students would come, but see, from all these different places, coming to these historically black colleges and universities. In the community where you live, it was something that the whites were doing. Gangsterism. Gangsterism. The gangsters and the mobsters. The early 1900s. It was something that was what the whites were doing. See, it wasn't just the Ku Klux Klan terrorizing the black / African Americans. They were Freemasons. Excuse me. Imposing Western mystery tradition, Western esotericism upon the former slaves. It was something else being done now. It's gangsterism. Excuse me. Think about in the early 1900s. And think about this. After the Civil War, you remember them cowboy movies? You remember them cowboy movies? Think about this after the Civil War. People moving, going west. All the white people leaving the east, going west. After the Civil War. And then you had more states being added to the Union. Gangsterism. You remember, think about how all these cowboy movies, and you'll hear about the cowboy getting into a gunfight. You hear about some of these cowboy, the cowboys robbing the bank. Excuse me. And still fighting with the Indians. It's more and more white settlers go west. They come in contact with the first and Native Americans and get into, fights. But, the United States government was back united. So that you had a Confederate, you had the United States Army, the cavalry, fighting against the first and Native Americans. Is more and more white settlers come from the east going west. But it was something else. Gangsterism. See, this is the reason why you couldn't see it. When you had the former slaves being freed, all the states hadn't been established out west, past Missouri. But after the Civil War, the Ku Klux Klan started. Remember? The Ku Klux Klan started after the Civil War. Former Confederate soldiers. They were Freemasons. But you had these whites on the East Coast. Now you had some states that was in the South. There were former Confederate states like Georgia and Florida, South and North Carolina, Virginia. The states in the South on the East Coast, they were Confederate states. After the Civil War, many of the whites, because the South was destroyed. But you had these whites on the East Coast in the northern states, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. You had these northern states. The whites were moving from there. Gangsterism. The gangsters. See, this was it. Don't forget. Now, look down south. After the Civil War, the Ku Klux Klan, Georgia, Florida, the whites, North and South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, the southern states. They was in the South. So in those states, in these southern states that were part of the Confederacy, it was the Ku Klux Klan. And them whites, the only thing they were trying to do is to keep the niggers under control. That's what they was all about. Is to keep these damn niggas under control. But in them northern states, in the Northeast, in the state of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut and Rhode Island, all them northern states. Washington, D.C., North, South, whichever one. The capital, Washington, D.C. But when you go north, Ohio, when you go into them northern states, gangsterism. And so when you got all these whites, and some of the whites from the East Coast from the southeast, from Georgia, Florida, and all that, northern South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, all them, Delaware. Some of them people, some of the whites left. Some, not all. Some, a few. But in them northern states, it was a lot of people, a lot of whites. Because remember, you had this immigration from Europe. Now, the first white people that came, European, you know, it was them Protestants that came over. But after the Civil War, because the people in Europe, they did know that there was a civil war going on. Because some of the Europeans, based on history, some of them Europeans were trying to side with one or the other. They know there was a civil war going on. But after the Civil War, many of them Europeans was coming. They was already coming. But they, when the Civil War was over, they came over. Gangsterism. Gangster. Being a criminal. So like we said, you remember them old Western movies? Them cowboy movies? Gunfights and robbing banks, robbing a stagecoach, cheating in cars. See? The gangsters. Going out west. So when it comes to historical black colleges and universities, when you got this type of stuff in the community, and then you got students coming to the school, see, this is what started coming, and then you start seeing some of this sorority fraternity stuff. It's like you were getting into it with other sororities and other fraternities. That's what that means. That's what that means. Gangsterism. Yeah. That's what that means. And then you have to remember this. When you look at the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, they had already told you what Gnosticism was. In esoteric and exoteric, Hermetism, the occult, a lot of that stuff is in the dictionary. And that means that at these colleges and universities, the whites already knew about it. And then at these historically black colleges and universities, they started teaching the black/African American students about these things in what you call religion, theology, and then later on you have religious studies. But at these other schools, colleges, and universities, the white students, they knew about it. They knew about Gnosticism. They knew about Hermetism. They knew about Neoplatonism. They knew about Freemasonry, because the whites, that's who did it. The Freemasonry and the Rosicrucians. The Kabbalah. They knew about it, because when the Europeans came from over in Europe, they already knew about the Kabbalah. Talking about the occult. Ain't no such thing, no werewolf. No such thing, no vampire. No such thing, no zombies. A ghost. A spirit. Spiritism. Looking at a crystal ball. You gonna tell me my future. Some cards. You gonna tell me my future. the occult, all this stuff. Now, don't get confused. Now, spiritism and occult, they're two different things. But and then later on, during the early 1900s, it was something else starting to come up. In the early 1900s, they started talking about socialism and being an atheist. The early 1900s. And then from being a socialist, you had the communists and the Marxists. And being an atheist. See? And this is a serious thing because many black / African Americans start saying things about, for instance, Paul Robeson. He identified himself as an atheist, as a supporter of communism. And there was a lot of things going on in the early 1900s. Garveyism, Marcus Garvey, Garveyism, going back to Africa movement. The Universal Negro Improvement Association. It still exists today. The Universal Negro Improvement Association. And but see, these are things that were going on in the early 1900s, just like when the NAACP got started, early 1900s, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and then about a year or two later, the Urban League started. So, but the thing about that gangsterism, it was still the Ku Klux Klan still terrorizing black / African American all the way up to the Civil Rights Movement. The Ku Klux Klan was still terrorizing black / African Americans. But more and more African Americans, black / African Americans were going to colleges. You couldn't go to the other colleges now. It was very rare that black / African Americans could attend other schools other than a black / African American college or university. But this is when this gangsterism was really starting to get rooted in at these historically black colleges and universities. This gangster stuff. Now in 1945, World War I, they fought World War I. Then World War II. Before World War II, you had the Prohibition now. And then you come to World War II. In 1945, the little farm boys outside playing over there in Egypt, in a park called Nag Hammadi, that's in Egypt, and found the Nag Hammadi library, some leftover Gnostic theologian writing that it didn't get destroyed. It should have been destroyed with the rest of that junk, because nowhere on this earth, after Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, and the other bishops in the Catholic Church, after they went around and collected all that theologian writing, all that Gnostic theology, you couldn't find no Gnostic writing nowhere. I'm talking about the Catholic Church went around and collected every copy of that Gnostic theologian writing and destroyed it. You couldn't find a Gnostic theologian writing anywhere. a person took a few copies of that Nazi theologian writing and put it in a jar and buried their name while east, should have been destroyed. See, at St. Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyons, together with St. Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, you ain't talking about nothing. They refuted Gnosticism and proved that Gnosticism was a heresy. They proved it. So you can sit around and say whatever you want, but you ain't nothing but a heretic. It don't mean nothing. Gnosticism don't mean nothing. And then again, Plato, in his book, the Timaeus or Timaeus, was talking about the demiurge being a good God who desire a world of good. The so-called Gnostics took that information and distorted it. They tried to claim that the demiurge was a clumsy God. It's a lie. You be lying. The sorority fraternity be lying. Just like the Gnostics be lying. The sorority fraternity, they be lying. They go around lying about religion. Not just Gnostics, they lie about all kind of crap. They'll lie about gangsterism. They'll lie about monster, they'll lie. They just lie. And all that hazing. You're just trying to use violence on the college campus. That's what all that hazing is. It's just violence. Doing the same doggone thing. Except on the college campus, they call it hazing. Just being violent. And trying to go behind people's backs and all that lying. But before I end today's video, I got some of my family pictures that I've been showing. And see, you try to go behind my granddaddy back, my grandmama back, on my mama and daddy's side, try to go behind people's backs. Try to deny my granddad and grandmama education. When they were growing up, they couldn't get no education. I'm going to be going a little fast. I know when I started my video, it was a little bit late. But yesterday, sometimes I ain't had to work or nothing. I just had to go get my oil change, and so it took me a minute, but had to wait in line. But like I said before I end the day video, I'm just gonna show some of my family pictures, because we're good people. My granddad and my grandmama, they were good people. And I love them. I love my granddad, love my grandmama. Love my dad, love my mama, love my brothers. And love my children, my nieces and nephews. And see, that's the reason why things look the way it look. You just go around trying to lie to people. And then because of the lies you tell, people make choices and decisions because of what the lies that people tell. And then during the 60s, in the 50s, and the 40s, people you ain't had nobody to turn to. So in the community, people look to the sorority and fraternity for guidance because they had the education. And then the people that you look to for guidance who had education, you couldn't depend on, you couldn't rely on. Because they'll lie. Now, then my grandmama, Ludabelle, she Ludabelle Dixon Johnson. You know, she married my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. My grandmama Ludabelle Dixon Johnson. See, that's my daddy's mom. My grandma, Ludabelle, and she was a Dixon. She married my granddad, Ludabelle Dixon Johnson. Like I say, see, that's the reason why I sympathize with my grandma during the time she was raised. I know a lot about the circumstance, the situation, and I really do sympathize with my grandma what she had to go through when she was growing up, in her childhood. I always love my grandmama. I ain't gonna forget her. Always. Granddad. That's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. Now, see, grandmama and granddad both from Mississippi. And then when they got married, they moved to Memphis. And then after they separated, see, granddad went to Detroit, Michigan. And grandma, she moved to Chicago. And she lived in Chicago up until the day she passed away. But that's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. That's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. That's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. It's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. It's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. It's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. My granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. It's my granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. Now, granddaddy, he had got remarried to Miss Sally Mae. My granddad had got remarried to Miss Sally Mae. Now this picture my granddad and my dad. Now this picture of my granddad, my grandma, my mama on here, and my uncle Lemmy, and then my older brother Randall. Oh yeah. That's granddad and grandma, and then mom, then my brother Randall, and Uncle Lemmy. Yeah, yeah. That's granddad and grandma, and my mom, and my older brother Randall, and Uncle Lemmy. And my granddad and my grandma and my older brother Randall. granddad and grandma and my older brother around me. This grandmama, granddad, and Uncle Lemuel. Now that's my dad, Chester, and my Uncle Lemon. They were young. They were young men. Now this my daddy. Let's see, my grandma, Ludabelle. After she separated from my granddad, she had another son, Walt. He was the third of my grandmother's children. He was the third. And see, after Walton got grown, became adult, then he moved to Chicago. And he was living in Chicago up until the day he passed away. Yeah, that's my Uncle Walt. Now Uncle Walter got married to Miss Nora. He got married to her later in Chicago, and then had a son, my cousin James. I say they're my Aunt Nora in Chicago. It's my Aunt Nora in Chicago. Now this is my mama and my Aunt Nora in Chicago. When mama, went up to visit in Chicago. Yeah, this mama and my Aunt Nora went to visit up in Chicago. Now this is Uncle Walter and James, my cousin James. Now this is a picture of my mama, she on the picture, and then my older brother Randall, he on this picture, and my cousin James, and me. And this is a picture of my cousin James and me. And this is a picture of my cousin James in Chicago. And this is a picture of my cousin James in Chicago. then there's a picture of my cousin James in Chicago. Now, grandma, my grandmama Lulabelle, my grandmama Lulabelle, after she had Walter, she had a daughter, Virgin May. Now I don't have a picture. I don't have any picture of my grandmama daughter, Virgin May. My daddy's sister. Because my daddy, he was the oldest. Chester was the oldest. Then the second oldest was Lemuel. When my granddad and my grandma was together. When my granddad and grandma separated, grandma had a child, a son, Walt, my Uncle Walt. Then grandmama had another child by a different man, Virgin May, a daughter. Now, like I said, Virgin May was living in Chicago. Though my dad, it said, she was living in Chicago and she passed away. But grandmama had a son after she had Virgin May. My Uncle James Demo. Now he was living down in Mississippi. This picture of my Uncle James Demo. Now my grandma, Lulabelle Dixon Johnson, she she had another son. He was the youngest, Verlee Jr. And he was living in Chicago up until the day he passed away. I say this picture of my uncle Verlee Jr. and some of his relatives. my uncle Burley Jr. and some of the relatives. Now, see, when I think about my grandma, Lulabelle Dixon Johnson, like I say, when I think about the things that I learned about my grandma, her childhood, she ain't had no ideal childhood. She got married, growed up, and was raised in Mississippi, growed up, raised in Mississippi. I'm always love my grandma. I'm always have love in my heart for my grandma. And I'm always sympathize with my grandma. Always. She got married to my granddad. Had 2 children. My dad, Chester Johnson Jr. And had my uncle, Lemuel Johnson. And she had some more children. My Uncle Walter, Aunt Virgin May, James Demo, and Verlee Jr. And all her grandchildren. I'm one of her grandchildren. My older brother, and my brother Marvin, he passed away. My brother, he got sick. Yeah, but that's another one of her grandchildren. My older brother Marvin, my dad is, before he met my mama, he had a son, Marvin. I'm gonna show his picture in a minute. But when I think about my grandma, that's what I mean. My grandma and my granddad. My grandmama Lulabelle Dixon Johnson. My granddad Chester Johnson Jr., Chester Johnson Sr. See, during the time that they was growing, when they was born into the world, the early 1900s. See, talking about some Freemasonry, talking about some esotericism. See, the Ku Klux Klan were going around terrorizing black men and women, African Americans, in Mississippi, in Tennessee, in Arkansas, in Alabama, in Texas, in Louisiana. The Ku Klux Klan was terrorizing. In Georgia, in Florida, in North and South Carolina, in Virginia, in West Virginia. The Ku Klux Klan, Baltimore, in Maryland. The Ku Klux Klan was terrorizing in Kentucky, in Missouri. The Ku Klux Klan was terrorizing black / African Americans. When my grandmama and granddad was born into the world, see, it wasn't no getting no education. Just coming out of slavery. When my grandma and granddad were born into the world in the early 1900s, I'm knowing that my grandmama and granddad, they grandparents, they parents. I'm knowing they just came out of slavery. The Freedmen's Bureau trying to give education to my grandmama and my granddad. It wasn't no Nagamon library, but people knew about Nazism. The white people knew about Nazism. See, that's the reason why so many of these black / African Americans, they'll tell you that somebody in their family was a Freemason. couldn't even read. Couldn't even read. But they was a Mason. Couldn't even pronounce Mason. Couldn't even pronounce their own name. But you was a Mason. See, that's what the Ku Klux Klan did. Some former Confederate soldiers who were Freemasons terrorizing black/African Americans. When my daddy and my mama, they born into the world, see all this gangster and gangsterism was starting to really become prevalent in the community. And they found that Nagma library in 1945 in the so-called sororities and the fraternity, the sohos and the frat bitches going around trying to use and misuse that Nagma library. Now I showed you some pictures on my daddy's side of the family, on my mama's side of the family. See, my granddad, my grandmama, Annie Lockett, she was a Nelson. And my granddad, Elmore Lockett. They both from Mississippi. See, when they were born into the world, just like on my dad's side, my grandmama and granddad, they were born into a world the early 1900s. The Ku Klux Klan were going around terrorizing black/African Americans. On my mama's side of the family, my granddad and my grandmama. My grandmama, Annie Lockett, she was a Nelson. And my granddad, Elmore Lockett. Now, my mom, she was the youngest of all her brothers and sisters. She was the youngest. So this is a picture of three of her older brothers. And one of them is the oldest out of all of them, James, my Uncle James. And I think there's, I don't know if there's Calvin or George, Uncle Calvin or George. And then Uncle Raymond. But see, Uncle Raymond was a twin when he was born. The twin died at birth. So, you know. Now, one of my mama's older brothers, I forgot my wallet. I got a newspaper clipping. But one of my mama's oldest brothers, George Lockett, was living in Chicago. And he passed away in 1972. But he was living in Chicago. Now this is a picture of my granddad and my grandma. My grandmama Annie Lockett Nelson, and my granddad Elmore Lockett. And then three of my mama on this picture with two sisters, my Aunt Betty and my Aunt Bertha. I think it was at church, because there's some other people, I think some church members on the picture. Now this is a picture of my granddaddy, my grandmama Annie Lockett Nelson, and my granddaddy Elmore Lockett, and my mama on this picture, and my older brother Randall, and me. Like I said, before my dad got married to my mama, he had a son with another lady, and my older brother Marvin Carr. Now Marvin had gotten sick, and he had passed away, but that's my older brother Marvin Carr. Now that's my older brother and his children. Now this picture of my mama, and see my older brother Randall, little son Randall Jr. Now, by me being the youngest child, my older brother Randall, he older than me. So, my big brother, he older than me. These some of his pictures before I was born. Now, I showed my family photos for their reading, and I want to make sure I don't never forget. I don't never forget. Good people. My granddad and my grandma on my dad's side. My grandma, Ludabelle Dixon Johnson. I ain't gonna never forget my grandma. I'm gonna always have love. I'm gonna always love my grandma. My granddad, Chester Johnson Sr. I'm gonna always love my granddad. And when I think about my granddad and my grandma, they were good people. They were good people. They were born into a world where the cards were stacked against them. Born into a world of injustice. Mama always loved my granddad and grandma. And going around trying to talk about some Western esotericism, Western mystery tradition, and all this other Hermetism, Neoplatonism, and talking about some Gnosticism, and going around talking about the Kabbalah, going around talking about this Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, going around talking about some Spiritism, talking about the occult. Theosophy, anthroposophy don't mean nothing. Don't none of that junk mean nothing. Then on the other side, exoteric. Talking about some esoteric is inside, internal, within. And exoteric is outside, external, without. They made it up. There ain't no such thing as no Gnosticism. They made that up. Lying. Talking about the demiurge is a clumsy god. They lying. Plato had already wrote in his book, the Timaeus or Timaeus, that the demiurge was a good god. Going around lying and trying to be violent and all this anal sex. You know, my mama's side, my granddad and my grandmama. See, on my daddy's side and my mama's side, my grandmama and granddaddy both were from Mississippi, being terrorized by the Ku Klux Klan. My grandma, Annie Lockett Nelson, and my granddad, Elmore Lockett. I'ma always love my granddad and my grandma, always. I'ma always feel sympathy for my grandma and my granddad, always. I'ma always sympathize with my grandma and my granddad, always. I ain't gonna never forget my grandma and my granddad. I'ma always remember my granddad and my grandma, always. I'ma always love my mama and my dad. When I think about my mama, the world that she growed up in, the same thing, racism, bigotry, prejudice, racism, oppression. Then had the nerve to lie. Talking about some Gnosticism. I'ma always love my mom. I'ma always feel sympathy for my mom. Had the nerve to lie. Talking about some Gnosticism. When I think about my dad, I'ma always love my dad. I'ma always love my dad. A good man. My mama's a good mama, a good woman, and my dad is a good man. You had the nerve to lie. I'ma always love my dad. This house that I'm living in, my dad and my mama worked day They paid for this. This house paid for. Me and my brother was raised in this house. Paid for. I'ma always love my dad and my mom. Always. I had the nerve to go around lying about some narcissism because of nagging my library. They already knew about narcissism. They had the nerve to lie. The demiurge is a clumsy God. That's a lie. Saint Irenaeus, Saint Ignatius had already refuted Gnosticism, proved that Gnosticism was a heresy. Denied my grandmama and granddad education so they wouldn't know that Gnosticism had already been refuted by Saint Irenaeus and Saint Ignatius. Didn't want my dad and my mama to get an education. It's in the dictionary. Gangster. Gang. It's in the dictionary. Mob and mobster. It's in the dictionary. It's in the dictionary. But you ain't want my dad and my mama to get education. Didn't want my grandmama and my granddad to have education. They go around using violence as a method of persuasion. It's the reason why on these college and university campus, all this hazing, violence. That's what that is, violence. Using violence as a method of persuasion. But I wanted to make my video today, I know that the conservative vice lord in Chicago, you ain't got to see that's the reason why I do the things I do. See, you ain't got to lose no sleep at night. You ain't got to lose no sleep at night about no sorority, no fraternity. Talking about no Western esotericism, Western mystery. They ain't talking about nothing. As you can see, that's the reason why I do the things I do. To make sure that the sorority fraternity, no matter what. No, you lying. You lying. All you doing is lying. They talking about some narcissism, same thing. You ain't conservative vice lord, they ain't got to lose no sleep at night. They ain't doing a line. Talking about some demiurge. Plato all the way back. Plato before Jesus Christ. Plato had wrote a book, the Timaeus, or Timaeus, had already wrote a book talking about the demiurge before Jesus Christ. Plato had wrote a book talking about the demiurge being a good god. And you know the Catholic Church, where they got their painting is in Italy. What's the painter name? Raffaello. He did a painting. And Plato, in that painting, got a copy of his book, the Timaeus or Timaeus. And Plato's student, Aristotle, got a copy of his book in his hand. Conservative vice lord ain't got to lose no sleep at night. And then all this stuff, them gangster disciples sitting up in Chicago, it's just like I've been saying. You got the nerve to sit up in a public housing project talking about you trying to go behind my back, gonna go behind my brother's back in a public housing project. Sitting up in a public housing project in Chicago. And I'm down here in the same house that my daddy and my mama worked all those years to pay for. But you got some coward, some dumbass sitting up in Chicago in a public housing project. Tell me they going behind my back with some nag in my library. St. Ignatius, the Bishop of St. Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyon, St. Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, had already refuted Gnosticism. Proved that Gnosticism was a heresy. The sorority and fraternity been lying all these years. It didn't make no difference about that little farm boy finding the nag in my library. It didn't make no difference. Because they already know it was some Gnostic writing. It don't matter. St. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, had already tried to destroy all that Gnostic theologian writing. It don't matter. The nag in my library don't matter. It don't matter. The Catholic Church as a whole had already made it perfectly clear about Gnosticism. Made it perfectly clear. All you be doing is going around lying, trying to use violence as a method of persuasion. And all this anal sex. All this anal sex. So that was the conservative idea. When you see them gangsters site over there in STL and EBT and all these, what they call them, that gummit. They try to copy so much. I don't want to get them confused. KTS over there. Then you got over there in Cabrini Green. You know what I'm saying? And all this other stuff. They've been making blogs and all that. Conservative Lord ain't got to lose no sleep at night. When I leave my video, this is what I'm telling you. When you see my family, the reason I put my family there. Because I'm mad about it. My granddad and my grandmama. My dad and my mama. My brothers. My children. My nieces. Nephews. Cousins. Aunts and uncles. That's what I'm mad about. You trying to victimize innocent men, women, and children. So like I said, conservative bylaw, that's the reason why you ain't got to worry about it. When I put my picture there, I show you my grandmama and my granddad. Grandmama was living in Chicago when she passed away. My Uncle Walter was living in Chicago. My cousin Jane was living in Chicago. My Aunt Nora, my Uncle Walter's wife, she was from Chicago. They were living in Chicago the whole time. I never said nothing. My daddy's little brother, Jane Demo, down in Mississippi. My dad's little brother, Walter's little brother. My Aunt Virgin May. I didn't have a picture of my Aunt Virgin May. She was living in Chicago. She was living in Chicago when she passed away. Verlee Jr. living in Chicago when he passed away. Up until the time he passed away. See, the conservative bylaw, they gonna already know. When they see the picture, they gonna already know that these people were living in Chicago. And to be honest with you, my grandmama, Lulabelle, some of the people that were related to my grandmama, Lulabelle, were living in Chicago. Conservative bylaw know it too. They know damn well that there's some people living in Chicago related to my dad. And down in Mississippi know it too. There's some of my grandmama Lulabelle family down in Mississippi. They know. See, this is the reason why I do the things I do. When I leave my video, I be knowing I got cousins. That's the reason why I do it. You gonna goddamn go sit up here and lie. and then try to use violence. On my mama's side here, my mama's older brother, George Lockett, was living in Chicago when he passed away in 1972. Was living in Chicago. That's all people were doing. Going to Chicago. Sam Cooke was living in Chicago. Started singing with the Soul Stirrers. Going around on the Bible highway, on the gospel highway. Then he went from the gospel to pop and all that soul music. Went from Chicago to Los Angeles, California. Him and his wife. And the children. Went to Los Angeles. And Lou Rawls left Chicago, went to Los Angeles, California. Yeah, Sam Cooke's wife, Miss Barbara Campbell Cook. Miss Barbara Campbell Cook. I know that was right on tip. Miss Barbara Campbell Cook. Sam Cooke married his childhood sweetheart. She left Chicago with Sam Cooke, moved to Los Angeles from Chicago. No damn body said nothing about no damn gang, talking about no avenues. Nobody tell you that, man. Then my Uncle Walter living up in Chicago. My grandma was living in Chicago. My Uncle George Lockett was living in Chicago. All right. You got all these people living in Chicago and then the family down here living in Memphis, Tennessee. Nobody tell you nothing about no damn to do nothing like that. When there was all this other stuff going on in Chicago. You just be lying. Talking about some Crip gang and Blood gang. See, the Black Princeton Blood, see, like I said, that's the reason why I leave my video here, because the conservative vice lord, I know damn well the conservative vice lord walking around in Chicago, when they see it, they know that they be lying. Them damn gangster sites ain't doing them a lying. That's all you doing. And then talking about some black gangster new breed. You ain't doing them a lying. You ain't no damn better. The Lord Stone disciples will be united. Will be united. Lord Stone disciple will be united. Conservative Vice Lord Incorporated. It's going to be revitalized. That's the reason why. You've been lying the whole time. Bootstrap Incorporated going to be revitalized. Because all you've been doing is lying. And trying to use violence. And all this damn anal sex. I'm going to get ready to end today's video. I thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, Son of God, for all the blessings and the guidance that He provides all with. You know, I've been seeing some stuff on the news. I'm going to say this. They still got this stuff going on in Israel. You know, the Israelis still fighting against this Hamas and everything. Don't Hamas look stupid? Don't you see how stupid you look? How many Palestinians got to die before you finally accept the fact that it was wrong what you done? I'm talking about over 25,000 Palestinians have been killed, have died. And they still stand up here trying to make it sound like it's something right that you did. How many damn Palestinians got to die before Hamas finally admit that what they did was wrong on October 7th? Just how many Palestinians got, the Israelis, you know, only thing they trying to get the hostages back. But you don't see Israelis dying like that. The most Israelis died was on October 7th, and then some of the Israeli military being in combat. Might have got killed and, possibly got killed or injured in combat. But do you see the Israeli citizens dying like you see the Palestinians dying? See, this is what the stupid stuff that people do. You make yourself like a damn fool. Over 25,000 Palestinians have died. Compare that to October 7th, the number of Israelis. You look like a damn fool. And the Palestinians are still dying. Now you got all these Palestinians been displaced. You're a damn fool. Who you trying to impress like you too proud to admit that what you did was wrong? All these Palestinians have been displaced, suffering. But see, like I said, this is what they wanted to do. See, all this stuff about the different sets of Islam. You got the Sunni Muslim and the Shiite Muslim. See, this is what they'll do to each other. This is what they'll do to each other. Because they have some kind of Islamic disagreement about the interpretation. So they'll fight each other. But you look like a damn fool. I mean, what you accomplish? You haven't accomplished a damn thing. You got this war still going on in the Ukraine. Going on 3 years now. The Ukrainians are still begging, pleading for weapons. Still begging and pleading for weapons. Still begging, please give us some weapons. And then we'll win the war. When they gave you some weapons, goddamn it, you won winning the war. The Russians, excuse me, they fighting against this so-called counteroffensive. There's a lot of Ukrainians are dead, man. Military and civilian. Dying every day. And the American news media, politically, you can try to paint this picture. You can try to paint the picture like you want it, over here. But over there, the reality is, it ain't looking good for the Ukraine. And then talking about being on the battlefield, that ain't no place, that ain't no easy place to be. You can have all the weapons you want. The Russians got weapons. And, and then, they done made it through the wintertime. Finna be spring, then what you gonna do? Because when springtime comes, all this stuff in wintertime, the Russians gonna move forward. Because, as it like, hey, the longer this war go on, the worse it get for the Ukraine. Because they losing men in the thousands every day. And it's just a matter of time before it get to the point where it just, it's useless. It ain't gonna. You can keep on begging for weapons, but it ain't gonna make a damn difference because you ain't got enough men. And then the atmosphere, like at the beginning, you had people hyped up, but it ain't like that no more. A lot of civilians are dead. A lot of civilians are dying every day, just like the military. See, it was really senseless for you to instigate stuff with the Russians in the first place. Like I've been saying, the people here, you should, your common sense, all these people are the same people. The Slavics. So I don't, what the hell you got to be get into a bloody fight for? You're the same people. But see, you listen to these outsiders who don't want to do no but use and abuse, and you just like the damn Hamas. You just make a damn fool out yourself. That's all you do. Make a complete fool out yourself. Look, man, I'm finna end this video. I gotta go get me something to eat. I gotta go fix me something to eat. Look at until next time. Again, my name is Eric D. Johnson. Also, my BrightShine everybody in the city is in the county sheriff in the state of Tennessee. I thank all my family, my support for you, continue encourage support, and until next time, you take care of yourself. Wish each and every one of you the very best.